Hello, my name is Dan and I run a recording and rehearsal studio in Bath. I also sing for a number of bands and I co-run a small independent record label. This video masterclass is primarily aimed at young bands, unsigned bands at the early stages of their career or band life. I've split this video up into a number of sections, so feel free to skip to the section that you feel best suits your needs. If you're just starting out and starting to dip your toes into the world of physical media, I would recommend that you watch all of the video, as there will be some things which will directly relate to you and I hope will help. Disclaimer. So before I go on, it's customary in this day and age to put some kind of disclaimer at the beginning. Everything I'll be telling you is, of course, my opinion based on my experience in this field. If you disagree with anything, that's great. I'm not saying that everything I say is correct in this. It's just my experience, my own personal opinions on how best to sell your music and how to make money out of your music. So secondly, I will be briefly discussing some prices of certain things. I'll be talking in pounds sterling as I'm based in England in the UK. The prices will be roughly accurate as of today's date, which is Tuesday the 22nd of February 2022. These things go up in value all the time, so I would urge you to do your own research at the time and date and space and time that is applicable to you. And lastly, as I'll be talking about selling things, I'll be using generalities to discuss the products and the types of people that you hope to buy your products. So I will be generalizing about certain groups, genders, sexes, ages, and how they spend their money. If you're easily offended by things like this, I would suggest you don't watch the video. I understand many people don't like it when we talk in general terms, but as we are talking about spending your cold hard cash, I believe it's important to be realistic about what you are likely to sell and to whom. And of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. That's why I'll be talking in general terms. And it's worth mentioning that the types of people that I sell items to will not necessarily relate to yours for obvious reasons. You might be an electro-funk band, you might be a death metal solo artist, you might be a drill rapper. Now, in general, though, the audiences for each of those different genres are likely to be different. So if I do offend you in any way, I apologise now. Please comment on the video and let me know. So let's get right to it. Why sell physical music? So what's the point in selling music in a digital world? Don't most people consume their music through Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, YouTube these days? Well, the point of selling your music in a physical form is simple: to make money. It's not the only point, but it is a big one. Now, not many of you will be making enough money on your digital sales to be able to retire to Skegness, let alone Marbella. Now, secondly, believe it or not, there are still a lot of people who like to own something physical, tangible, something real. It's true that the older generations are the ones who have tended to stick to the traditional formats, but increasingly, younger music listeners are returning to the physical world. Maybe they're fed up of the cold, sterile nature of online music, but the statistics and numbers are now in. Vinyl sales have increased annually for the last 14 years. Most industry executives now accept that vinyl is back for good. Vinyl has now transcended the format wars which crippled the format in the 90s. With the arrival of the CD in the early 80s and a slew of other formats that came along after, such as the mini disc in the 90s, vinyl no longer has to compete against these formats. It now has a place in the hearts and minds of music listeners of all ages. Now, before I go on, you might be one of those people who is not interested in vinyl. You might think people spending 50 quid on a Fleetwood Mac reissue from HMV or spending £75 on an original pressing of In Utero by Nirvana on Discogs for 75 quid, you might all find that a bit weird. That's fine, but I think you're missing the point. Ironically, this isn't about you. It's about your fans. What are your fans buying and what do they want? The great news is that the format of CD is also on the comeback. Last year saw the first rise in CD sales for 17 years. I used to work at HMV back in the early 2000s, and I remember when CD was king and people would happily pay £17 for a Now compilation. And then Napster came along and destroyed everything. But yes, amazingly, against all odds, CDs are back. And again, you might be thinking, who the hell buys CDs these days? I haven't bought one in 15 years. I'll remind you, it is not about you, it is about your listeners. And it's not just about CDs, it's not just about vinyl, tape cassettes as well. People are still making their music on tape cassette. People are making their music on mini disc, believe it or not. They're all growing in sales, and I'll be honest, I never saw that coming. What I would say though is I personally have pressed 3 or 4 things on tape for the band I'm in over the last few years. I don't have any examples to show you because we sold out of them all. So, and they sold out fast. So that might tell you something about tape cassettes. And lastly, why sell physical music? Now, without getting too spiritual on you, isn't it a wonderful feeling to put something out into the world? Something that may seem insignificant to some people, but for me it means a lot. I remember the very first demo I recorded, or EP that I recorded with a band back in about 1997. The feeling of getting those CDs back from the pressing plants and holding it in my hand, I can't describe it. Psychologically, I believe it's very rewarding to be able to draw a line under something and say, there it is. That thing is a lovely physical document of that time and place. And last year I found a copy of that EP and was listening back to it, and it was magic. And of course the music was terrible. I was terrible. But the memories that that physical item evoked were precious. And I can tell you that the excitement I get from releasing something physically far exceeds the satisfaction I get from putting something out digitally. Now, digital is fine, but for me, it doesn't have the same feeling of putting a marker down on your life, like a note in a diary. Now, that just might be my nerdy collector, hoarder mentality kicking in. In general terms, I think men especially are more likely to want to collect things, both buying things and collecting their personal items and filing them away. You know, I'm one of those people, I like to have everything in alphabetical order. You know, if I get into an artist, I generally like to buy everything. It's a bit of a nightmare, really, and obviously I have to curtail my own spending habits back. But I do kind of use that as a way of tapping into the psychology of the people that you're trying to sell to. But essentially, you want people to enjoy your music. You want them to get invested in your brand, your identity. There's no better way of getting them to invest in you other than allowing them the opportunity to own it. And of course, not every one of your fans will want it. But you have to make a calculated decision. Can I sell enough of XYZ to break even? Possibly make even a small profit. Possibly make a little bit of money extra to allow you to make the next one. Because that is what it's all about, essentially. You write your own music, record it, manufacture it, release it, move on to the next one. And you don't stop. You always have to have another date in your diary. You give yourself achievable goals. You know, you do everything you can to make sure that goal happens, and happiness and fulfillment is awaiting you. Is it the right time to release my music physically? So, silly question warning. Is your music any good? It isn't? Then don't release it. Rehearse, get better, work with more people, write better songs, and then possibly think about releasing your music. So is your music good? That's great. Is it recorded well? If it isn't, again, I would say don't release it. To be serious for a second, no one wants to hear a demo. I personally don't like the term demo, because I get bands emailing the studio saying they want to record a demo to sell at their gigs. And I reply stating that we'll happily have them in to record their professional music for a single, an EP, an album. But we don't do demos because Demos suck. No one wants to hear a demo. A demo is there for you. It's for your benefit. It's for the band's benefit. It might be something you're using as a pre-production tool to improve your writing or to learn the songs or get them prepared for when you do essentially perform them or record them properly. And demos can be done at home. You don't need a professional studio to record a demo. You can use electronic drums and just use plugins for your guitars. It's just there as a sketch for your music. So let me spell this out for you as clear as I can. If your music does not sound as good as it can be, with your limited resources, please don't release it. Wait until you can record it properly. You don't want someone's first impression of you or your band to be a poorly recorded, amateurish demo. Unless you are supremely talented to the point where your genius shines through the awful production, it's not worth your time. I'd recommend saving your money, keep rehearsing, working on your sound, because you want to be proud of your material. I mean, will you be happy selling a poorly produced CD at your gigs for £10? Do you think that person who buys that will be happy when they get home from your awesome gig to hear that bag of noise you call an album? Throughout all of this process I'll be talking about today, you want to be thinking of one word: quality. Quality audio, quality artwork, quality finish, quality packaging, even the way you sell the item. If someone buys your record online, make sure you send it in a quality, safe bit of postal packaging, in a quick and quality fashion. You are representing your band or career at each and every moment you interact with your fans. Until you have a label or management or someone representing you, it's all down to you. But let's assume you don't really have enough people to sell your music to yet. I would suggest you start small. You're going to have to dip your hand into your wallet and take a small risk at some point. And you have to speculate to accumulate. But if you are gigging regularly and your music's great and you're engaging with people, there's no reason why you can't convince 50 people to buy a CD. Those 50 CDs should effectively pay for themselves and hopefully leave you with a little bit of money left over. And maybe next time you get 100 CDs, maybe get some t-shirts and slowly build up from there. So assuming you have something quality to sell and someone to sell it to, let's move on to the next chapter. What is the better format? CD, vinyl, tape, digital? I'll cut to the chase on this one. It doesn't matter. It's all about what your customers want. You might love collecting locally produced vinyl. It doesn't mean your fans do. This is where you need to do some market research, and this will primarily depend on the type of music you play and the scenes or the crowds that you move around in. Look at what the headline bands are selling when you play gigs with them. Generally, promoters and venues will ask you to play gigs with bands or artists that your music complements. So that's a great way to see what works for these bands who might be slightly further along the road than you are. But I know that some of you will be asking the next question because they ask it all the time, and they usually ask it because they already have a fixed opinion and they want to spout off about it. Does vinyl sound better than CD or vice versa? Well, the answer is yes and no. Vinyl has its own inherent sound, so does CD. There's so many variables to consider that it's kind of a bit of a pointless debate. The main issue I have with CD is not so much the technical aspects of the format, but the way that the vast majority of music is mastered for it, because CD is capable of having a higher bandwidth, for lack of a better term, than vinyl. I mean, the information that can be stored on there means that producers cotton onto the fact that early on they could make music louder. They wanted their mixes to pop out of the stereo, so the loudness war happened. It basically became a race to the bottom where bands were trying to make their music slam harder than their peers. But all of this was sadly to the detriment of the dynamics in the music, your lights and shades and your quiet sections and the general ambience. Whereas on vinyl, you simply can't do that because you can't master to that volume on vinyl because the needle will literally jump off the actual grooves. So you could argue that vinyl generally sounds more faithful to the sound that's coming out the speakers in the control room when it's mixed, assuming it was recorded well. But many people prefer the clean sound of a CD. But all of this is kind of irrelevant if you're playing your music through a crap system. If you're going to extol to me the virtues of vinyl, when I know that you're paying £65 for a vinyl reissue of Miles Davis kind of blue, but you're playing it through a £75 piece of crap from Urban Outfitters turntable, I'd probably find it hard to take your opinion seriously on that regard. But really, the whole is vinyl better than CD? Is tape better than vinyl? All that kind of debate is pointless, and to some degree, it's quite childish. You do you. I mean, with the label I co-run, we do it all. We'll do vinyl, CD, digital. So we're soon going to be doing tapes as well, as we know that our customers come in all shapes and sizes. But arguing about this kind of stuff reminds me of being in school. I had a ZX Spectrum and my friend had a Commodore 64, and we'd argue about which computer was better, and we'd all argue about the kid who had the Amstrad or the rich kids who had the Amiga or the Atari. And then later on it became the console wars. I was Team Nintendo and my friend had a Sega, and I said, well, we got 10,000 more colours than our Nintendo. And it just goes on and on and on. You do you. It doesn't really matter what you think. It matters what your customers think. So let's start with the CD. I would say for most artists starting out, a small run of CDs is probably the best way to start selling your music in a physical form, at least. They're fairly cheap to manufacture. Done well, they can look nice, they sound nice, easy to sell at gigs. You can fit them in a pocket or in a handbag. You don't need to sell many to break even. Now, there are two ways to get your CDs pressed. You can send them for duplication or replication. Now, I hear some of you saying, but Dan, you're missing something. We can also burn our own CDs at home on our PC, and my mate Dave can print the artwork up on his Hewlett-Packard printer. No, do not do this, please. They look bad. No one wants to own a crappy burnt CDR with rubbish artwork. I have no time for this school of thought, unfortunately. If your items look crap and amateur and cheap, chances are people won't want to give you good money for it. You might convince your friends and family to buy them out of sympathy, but you want to be looking beyond your friends and your family. You want to be kind of thinking a wider spectrum of possible people who might be listening to your music. Make sure you get your CDs done by a reputable company. So duplication was the first thing I mentioned. So this is when you want to press less than 500 copies of your CD. Now, duplicated CDs, they actually do use CDRs, blank media CDs. But done through a good company, they look very similar to normal CDs. The artwork can still be printed professionally, and they're a good option for bands starting out. You could get them pressed in a standard jewel case, something like that. Standard kind of run-of-the-mill CD case. Or you could go for a cardboard sleeve kind of thing, much cheaper. Or if you want it to be posh, you could do it in this kind of digipack format. But remember, it's still just a CDR, which means the quality isn't as good as a normal shop retail disc. They tend to scratch easier, they don't last as long, but they are an option when you're starting out. My much preferred method of pressing CDs is to have them replicated. They use what is called a glass master of your audio to press the CDs, and this is how all professionally sold CDs in shops, this is how they're all produced. Now, the quality is generally better, the printing on the disc is better, the CDs last longer, they're not CDRs, but but generally you won't find a company who's willing to replicate for any quantities less than 500. So this might sound like a lot for you, and it is, for a band or an artist starting out, but hear me out on this one. Let's take a standard dual case CD like this one. It comes in a clear case, it's glass mastered CD, it's properly printed, it's got a double-sided booklet inside, shrink wrapped. 500 of these costs roughly between £600 and £700. You could probably get it for less, depending where you get them from, and the number of pages in a booklet, that kind of thing. So let's say I got 500 of these for 650 quid. So I sell them at gigs and online for £10 each. So once I've sold 65 copies of that CD, I've broken even. Everyone's happy. Everything else on top of that is profit. Now, it might mean for many of you that you're stuck with a lot of stock for a while as you wait to sell. But look at it this way. You then have over 400 copies that, if you wanted to, you could give away to your fans, magazines, radio stations, labels, blogs. Plus, you're not giving them a rubbish demo, you're giving them a professional looking item. And if you're honest with yourself, if you don't think you can sell 65 CDs in a few months of gigging or plugging away online, you're probably doing something wrong. Now, no offense with that. Obviously, I know how hard it is to get your music out there and to start developing a bunch of fans and a bunch of followers and listeners. But if you applied yourself, I don't think selling 65 CDs would be that hard. I think you could do it. So for those reasons, I personally would always recommend getting your CDs replicated rather than duplicated. So what I was saying about earlier is quality all the way. The quality of the disc, the presentation, the artwork. So as long as you're aware of this and you can afford that initial outlay of money, then it's all good. If you can get 50 of your friends to pre-order it, it won't end up costing much at all because you can get the money in before you've even put the order in. If you're in a band with 4 or 5 other people, I'm pretty sure each member could sell 15 copies to their friends or family. So that's your costs taken care of straight away. And the other benefit of a CD is there's little to no waiting time at the plants. So most of the time you put an order in, 2 or 3 weeks, it's back. So let's talk about vinyl. Few issues with vinyl at the moment. You've probably heard about the news on the internet or on the news that a lot of the vinyl pressing plants are way behind, and because the demand is so great, it's very hard to get your stuff pressed on vinyl at the moment, and the costs are going up. And the lead times are going up. So it's generally about 7 months, a 7-month wait to get your vinyl back. Obviously, it depends on who you go to. Now, there is some good news on the vinyl front. There is at least one plant opening up in the UK. At the moment, from my own experience, we tend to get most of our vinyl pressed out in the Czech Republic through intermediate companies which are based in the UK, but they do send most of their work out to the Czech Republic, and I'm aware that in Germany and France and Holland there are some other plants, but we've been really kind of let down in the UK over the past few years. But there are a number of plants opening up, at least one I know of up north, who are in the very early stages. So that's really good news. So hopefully that's going to make sure the lead times and possibly the costs come down for British bands getting their stuff pressed. So that's something I would keep an eye on, and hopefully it's a trend that's going to continue, and maybe more people will take the plunge to open up their own record plants. So why would you want to put your stuff on vinyl? It's a hard one. There's many issues. Obviously, I've mentioned the lead times. The other thing about vinyl is it's so bloody expensive. Now, most of us musicians at some point dreamt about one day getting our music on vinyl, and I understand the urge to do that. The trouble is, most bands want to do it before they're ready, before they've got their customer base kind of established. Now, in many ways, they want to run before they can walk, which is why CD is quite a good option to start getting a little bit of money in the band account and start building up a little bit of a following. You do need to have a pretty sizable fan base to consider making it cost effective to release your stuff on a record. Now, there are some small run companies that will do, say, a run of 25 vinyls, and it's usually without the artwork, it's just a plain sleeve. But the issue there is the unit price point is not really competitive. It's not really at a price where you can make any money on top of it. So there's not really much room to make a profit. Plus, will your fans want to pay a premium price for something which looks quite basic without all the artwork and the trimmings that go with it? I'd say that these companies, that they're good for those bands who just want their music on vinyl for their own prosperity, their own reasons, their own collection, which I totally understand. It's great. I know many bedroom producers who get their stuff pressed as a one-off record just for themselves, and that's really cool. It's great to own something like that of your music. But again, the purpose of this video is about selling your music in a physical format, so I think it's not much point me talking about those companies. So let's talk about actually selling multiple copies of your record on vinyl. So here's a record that we released as a tribute to Alice Cooper. It's got various artists on it. It's 12-inch, heavyweight, 180 gram. It came in a number of different colours. I think we have 3 or 4 and black. And it's in a gatefold sleeve. It's got a printed inner. It's obviously got a nice artwork, front and back. Gatefold artwork inside. It's got the colour labels on the records themselves. Shrink wrapped. Now, I believe, without looking at the invoices, I believe 1,000 of those cost roughly £6,000. So that's £6 a unit. Now, if you're getting less than 1,000 copies, that unit price is going to go up and up. So let's say you're getting 200 copies of something pressed. You could be paying £9 or £10 a unit. Now, we obviously have to sell these things at a price which we can try and make our money back and make a bit on top, but also taking into account that when you sell stuff online, you're going to lose between 5 and 10% of the stock through the post, things being damaged, things being stolen. It's just a sad fact of life. Then PayPal take their 5% or whatever it is now. Stripe take their 5%. Bandcamp, if you sell it on Bandcamp, they take their 10%. Then you have to pay for the shipping and the packaging. We generally lose a couple of pounds just on the shipping, so we kind of soak that cost in ourselves. So we take a hit on that kind of thing. So after all is said and done, you might only be making a few quid on each record. And obviously some people complain that the cost of the record is too much, you're charging too much. The reality is that they're very expensive to produce and very expensive to send. So actually we're kind of selling ours at a bit of a subsidised rate because we want people to buy it and we want them to invest in the band, the label, that kind of thing. Plus it's a cool thing to have people collecting your stuff on record. And again, I was talking about allowing your listeners to buy into your brand, your identity. So that's a calculated risk for our record label, and obviously we're a record label, so we can afford to take certain amounts of risk, knowing that hopefully further on down the line that enough people would have bought into the concept and will start collecting our stuff as a label or as a band. Now, we know how many we need to sell of these in order to break even, and we're prepared to wait a number of months, even years, to do that. Because we're investing in the future and trying to build a reputation. But that might not be true for you. Now, I'm not trying to put you off getting vinyl made, but you do need to go into it with your eyes wide open. It's very expensive. Do you have a couple of 100 fans that you know will buy it? If you do, then go for it. Just make sure you get the costs right, and if possible, get them to pre-order it so you can kind of get some money in your account before you start spending tons of money. But also you do need to manage people's expectations. Like I said, you could be waiting 5, 6, 7, 8 months for your records to come back. So you need to tell people that before they make the order. So manage their expectations. Tell them, look, it's February now, so if we're selling stuff, if I'm putting an order in now, it might not be August, September by the time they actually get the records in their hands. So you do need to kind of be honest with them, and don't sell them a lie, because people don't like that. If you don't have a couple of hundred fans that will stump up the cash early, then you might need to, if it's something you really want to do as a band, if there's 4 or 5 of you, maybe you need to put your hands in your pockets and take a risk. Between 5 people, 400-500 quid each, you could probably get your stuff on vinyl. But it's all about quantities. So generally they have price points. So up to say 250 units is probably quite a high price point. Then it comes down at 500, and then it comes down again at 1,000. So you want to try and get your unit rates as low as possible. So each record you sell, you're making a decent amount of return. But obviously, you don't want to be stuck with hundreds and hundreds of records you can't sell. So bear this in mind before going down the vinyl route. Maybe it's a bit too early in your band's career to do it, or maybe you've got a couple of thousand likes on the Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. You've got a really decent mailing list. You know that your fans really enjoy your music and are engaging with you all the time. And of course, there's tape cassettes. Tapes are actually quite a good option for a lot of bands, because you can get them made in short runs, as many as 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. They're fun. They don't take long to make. You can get them done in a variety of different packaging. There's some really cool different types of cardboard packaging you can get. Loads of different tape colours. You can have a lot of fun with tapes. And again, the cost outlay isn't prohibitive. It wouldn't cost you a lot of money to get them made. You could do really short runs which sell out really quickly. Now that's something worth thinking about, actually, because if you can sell something out and not get any more pressed in that variety, that kind of it does inspire some people to want to invest in your band, because they'll, next time you put out another limited run of another cassette in a different colour, maybe they'll probably want to get in there a bit early because they knew the other one sold out really quick. So doing limited editions is quite a good way of inspiring people to kind of take the plunge and to buy your stuff. Tapes can be quite genre specific. I know a lot of indie bands who do really well with tapes. And then I know a lot of heavy black metal, grindcore metal bands who bizarrely sell a lot of tapes. I think tapes fit in well with that DIY ethic of some genres. They're the kind of thing that sell very well on merch tables and online. So definitely consider tapes if you want something cost effective to sell. Again, some people might be thinking, oh, who's buying tapes? I haven't bought a tape in 20 years. And I hate to keep repeating myself, but it's not about you. So you need to take yourself out of the equation. Now, in a future video, I'm going to be doing a talk on merchandise. And I see a lot of bands who end up getting a load of t-shirts printed because that's the style of t-shirt that the singer likes, or someone, whoever's in charge of the merch in that band. It's the kind of clothing that they like. But their fans aren't that person, so it's all very well saying, I don't like graphic tees, I like tees with like a minimal thing on it, or I like tees such and such. Well, that's fine, but it's not about you. What are your fans wearing? So at the gigs, you need to be looking at what they're dressed as, what kind of things are they buying. There's no point getting stuff made if the people who come to your gigs aren't going to buy it. So let's talk about artwork. So as with all physical formats, they're a great way to present your music in a cool and interesting fashion. And it's one of the great sadnesses of the death of physical media in the late 90s, early 2000s, is that artwork kind of got relegated to kind of something that's a bit meaningless and a bit irrelevant. Whereas I grew up in a time where artwork sometimes convinced me to actually buy the product. If I love the cover, sometimes I just buy it based on the strength of that. So artwork's really, really important. So please don't rush it. You might have someone in the band who's a good artist, who's good on the computer with Photoshop, Illustrator, that kind of thing. So yeah, great, go for it. But most of the time, you'll find there's no one in the band who's good at that kind of thing. So I would suggest you find someone who has the experience to do it. I mean, as with everything I've discussed today, feel free to contact me at the studio if you need contacts or you need help or advice, because we're always working with local artists, graphic designers, and for them it's dead easy to put out a CD or a vinyl layout, that kind of thing. It's important to make sure that you have someone professional sort all the layouts for you. Each company will have their own templates that they want you to work towards. They'll have their own specifications for the resolution, the type of file format they want it in. It's not always as simple as you might think. We sent a record off for print last year, and the company came back to us asking us to amend the artwork because at one point in the cover we had 110% of black. I had no idea what they meant by that. How can you have more than 100% of black in your art? So luckily we sent it to our artist and designer, who she has a history working in print, so she understood what it means. Make sure the artwork looks legit. It might be good to put a barcode on it. They're dead easy to buy and they're very cheap. It does mean that you could potentially have your stuff stocked in a shop. Perhaps you have a local record shop who'd like to stock your local music. I know there's at least one in Bath who're very keen to have local bands stock their music, and indeed we've got our stuff in stock in the shop. And when it comes to how to design whatever it is you're doing, a CD, vinyl, tape, take a look at other record designs, how they kind of place things, format things, and copy the format. Copy the format of something you like. Because remember, you don't just need the cover, you need to think about the spine, the reverse, the booklet in the CD, the label that goes on the CD or the label that goes on the record, the picture that goes behind the CD case. Get all of this done properly by someone who knows what they're doing, who's got an eye for design. Because remember, everything adds up to present you in the best possible light. And remember, there's lots of different packaging options available out there. So don't be afraid to do something lavish or different. There's lots of ways to present your CDs. I mean, as I said with CDs, you could go for something standard, like the old jewel case, which is, everyone knows what that's like. Then you got the kind of cardboard sleeve. That's a digipack that opens up. We did this CD for the studio. It's like a 3 CD set. And it opens up into a trifold thing. Really nice. Don't be afraid to experiment or do something a little bit different. There's collectors out there who favour certain types of presentation. So again, look at what your peers are doing and look at what they're selling and look at what's buying and take notes. So I'll just briefly talk about mastering. So you should always get your audio mastered for the appropriate format. So for CDs, you ideally need to get a mastering engineer to run off what's called a DDP file. I think some people call it a red book audio. But this is a zipped folder which you can send to the replication company so they can create your CDs purely from that. The DDP files can contain all the track information like CD text if you want it to. Always make sure you check the master before you send it, as they will create an exact copy of what you give them. If you have your tracks in the wrong order, it would prove a costly mistake to fix later. We recently had a band in the studio get their CDs printed without checking the audio master, so the track order was wrong, so we had to have the CDs remade for them, and it was a pain. But I mean, thankfully it was only 100 CDs, so it could have been worse. For vinyl, it's a different type of master, because like I mentioned earlier, you can't run the digital files for the vinyl because it simply the needle would just pop off. A good mastering engineer will know the type of frequencies which don't work well for vinyl. So normally you need a mastering engineer to run the masters off. If it's a 12-inch, it'll be side A and side B. It'd be 2 continuous WAV files. We've recently done a double LP for the band, so that's obviously 4 sides of vinyl. So we had to have side A, side B, side C, side D. And so vinyl masters, they're generally quieter than digital masters because of the format, the limitations of the vinyl format. And also remember, you don't really want to be surpassing about 22 minutes per side of a 12-inch at 33 RPM, because the thinner the grooves are, the poorer the sound quality. And indeed, many pressing plants will simply refuse to do a job where it's exceeding 22 minutes per side. And at 45 RPM, you need to reduce those times even further. There are plenty of resources on the internet to advise you how much music can be achieved per side, depending on the speed and the size of the record, for 7-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, etc. So for this, we'd always recommend using a dedicated mastering engineer to get your masters done. And some of them they're not as expensive as you think. Where do you sell your physical music? Well, your live performances is the best place to start, on a little merch table. Online, you might have a web store. Bandcamp is a good option for many people. Again, think about your presentation, because this is effectively your shop window. So a little bit of TLC in terms of the look and design of your website will go a long way. It also builds a bit of confidence in the person who's giving you their money. We use Bandcamp, and we also have a big cartel store. Some people prefer using one over the other, so we just have both, and we do kind of quite well on both. Sending your physical formats through the post, so if someone buys it online, let's say they buy it on Bandcamp. So if you're selling your music online, make sure you get the correct packing materials for the job. So for selling records, we use these mailers. Pull this open, record goes in there, put that over, fold it over, seal it there. Those are really good. They're the best we've found because they've got the corner protection, which kind of helps protect against the dinks on the edges of the vinyls, keeps it nice and secure. And you can send about 3 or 4 records in one of these. Don't send your records in anything other than a really sturdy mailer like this. I bought a record on Discogs last year, expensive record, and the seller literally stuck it in a paper envelope. So when it arrived, it was completely destroyed, as you'd expect. So I'll never be buying from that seller again. And CDs are the same. Just something simple like a CD mailer like that. They usually do the job. Good thing about CDs, obviously, if you send a CD and it gets damaged in the post, then just send them another. Because they're inexpensive to post, and they're inexpensive to make, so you can afford to send them another. And lastly, though, what you will need to do is to learn about the rates you need to charge for postage, because to send a record in the UK, so like imagine I'm singing a single record in here, like the one I showed you earlier. To send that second class, you're looking at I think it's about £3.50. If you were to send that in the EU, it's probably more like £12. And the rest of the world, you could be looking as much as £20 just to send it standard international post. It's a lot of money. We don't charge £20 to send a record. We'll charge less because we found that psychologically people are just not prepared to pay that amount, even though that is the actual cost to us. In fact, it's not the actual cost to us because we've got to pay for this. This is £1, and everything that goes with it. Like I said, you take off the fees, the selling fees, and everything. We do get messages from people thinking we're taking the piss with our prices. So we might sell like a double LP for 30 quid, and they might have to pay 15 quid to have it shipped to their house in Houston, Texas, for example. Well, the reality is that double record probably cost us over £20 because it's a double record. It might cost us like £22, £23 to send that. The cheapest option as well. That's not even recorded delivery. So we've already lost 5 quid or something on the actual postage. We've only charged them £15 or £16. Then you take off the cost of the packaging. Then you take off the cost of going to the post office and the petrol. We take sacks to the post office. Then you take off PayPal and Bandcamp fees and the cost of hosting your website. Before you know it, you might have only made a couple of quid on a record. but I would recommend obviously thinking very hard about what you set for the postage rate. Don't do it at a rate where you're going to be seriously out of pocket. I mean, we made that mistake years ago when we first started dipping our toes in vinyl about 6 or 7 years ago. I totally underestimated the cost of selling a record, and back then a record to the States cost about £11. That shows you how much it's gone up in that time. It used to cost me about £11 to send a normal record or a double record to the States, and I was only charging 6 or 7 quid. And annoyingly, we sold a lot to the States. For some reason, the band I'm in, we appeal very much so to people overseas, which is great. But then it meant that when it came to send these 100 records that I'd sold on pre-order, I was like, oh damn, I'm about 700 quid out of pocket here because I didn't take into account the additional fees. So it was a learning experience, and obviously I did learn from that. And I've had to, with the person I run the label with now, we've had to kind of think about these things going forward. And sometimes it's worth charging a little bit less for postage and soaking up a little bit of the loss yourself, because you might sell more of them. Or you might just pass on the cost completely to the customer and just be completely honest about it. There's not really a right or wrong answer until the Royal Mail sort their stuff out and provide a better, more cost-effective service. You don't have much of a choice in the matter, especially when you're unsigned and you're doing stuff yourself. I mean, there are options. You can get like a distribution deal for your music. You might find like a distributor, so like an independent one like Plastic Head. They're quite good. But the issue is with the distributor that they've still got to make money on your items, so they might only be giving you 6 or 7 quid for the record. Now it might cost you more than that to make it. So what's better? Is selling lots and lots of records through Plastic Head better because it gets your name out there? These are all calculated risks that you need to take. I mean, you might find that you're not really selling much online at all, but you sell lots at your gigs, which is better, isn't it? Because you're not paying those massive fees on top of it. So again, just think about what works for you, your audience, your customer, your music. Make sure you've already bought the mailers to send your stuff, and make sure you send it quickly as well, because no one likes to be waiting weeks and weeks for something, because the chances are they won't come back to you, and you want to hold on to their, your customers. You do want to treat this like a business to some degree, because you are the face of your brand, aren't you? So in summary, I hope this has given you some ideas of what to do with your music in a physical form. I genuinely think that there is still a need to sell your music in a physical format. It can generate money, it can generate interest in your work, it gives your listeners something to latch onto, and you may find that your listeners, they might favour a certain format. Perhaps you find that your female fans buy more merch items rather than the music, or perhaps your male audience are more likely to buy a t-shirt than a vinyl. Getting to know your audience is crucial. I would strongly recommend gauging your audience by doing some kind of pre-order for the items. I mean, that's a great way to figure out what it is they want. I mean, one of the bands I'm in, if we're honest, our profile of our audience is probably about 80% men, most of them in their middle age upwards, and we sell more t-shirts to men. We sell more tapes and CDs to women, and it's the same with records. There's different buying habits, and again, I'm generalizing there, so there's always exceptions to the rule, and I know plenty of female followers of our band who are just as rabid at collecting stuff as men. But it's important to think in general terms. If you look at the stats and look at what's selling and where and who to, you can make sensible decisions about where best to spend your band's money. Because I understand we're all struggling for money at the moment, so you have to make every penny count. But yeah, like I said, your results may and will vary to ours. So what works for us might not work for you. So that's about it. Did I miss something out? Please let me know. I can always do a follow-up video to this one, responding to any questions. I will also do a video on merchandise soon. such as t-shirts, hoodies, caps, mugs, badges, stickers, whatever else you can sell to your fans. So if there's something specific you'd like me to cover in that video, just ask. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I wish you the best with your music. Cheers, bye.